Codominance, I'm guessing. Yeah, okay, incomplete and codominance. Okay, yeah. So the examples I already showed, for example, were red and white creating pink. Um, but yeah, that can also be something else. Let's say mom has uh your mom has blonde hair and then your dad has black hair. So maybe their kid will have a hair color that's like somewhere in between that. Like light brown maybe, but it won't be either like black or blonde, say. So that's kind of like an example of incomplete dominance. Does that make sense? Yeah, so it's kind of where both of the traits mix together. Like neither of them shows up, but they both mix. Yeah, and then so for codominance, um yeah, like I showed the flower example, it's where basically both of the traits show up. So it's not like a mix of the two. It's I mean a necessary mix of like the colors, for example. It's just where both kind of share the dominance. So they each like individually show up, which is like an example of how, red and white flowers can make a flower with red and white petals. Like also say for example, the offspring of a black chicken and a white chicken might make a chicken with both black and white feathers, for example. Okay, so yeah, now let's go back to pedigrees. So yeah, they're really important for genetics research, and they basically show usually like one or two specific traits. So let's look at the picture here. In this example, um, basically the boxes always represent males and the circles always represent females. That's just how it works in pedigrees. Um, and basically you see this like half box here, the half box that's half filled. That is what shows that someone's a carrier for the trait. And the ones that are not filled at all, the ones that are just like white circles or boxes, those are the unaffected people. So they're not affected by that trait at all. They don't carry that trait. Um, but on the other hand, the ones that are filled in are the ones that are affected. So the trait will um like show up in them most likely. So an example of this, for example, can be a certain disease. So let's say the person at the top here has a certain disease. So when these people have kids, we can see these bars represent like their kids, their offspring. So one of them is unaffected, one of them is a carrier of the trait, another one is unaffected, one is affected by the trait, they actually like have the disease, and another is unaffected. So basically the difference to clarify of just carrying the disease and actually having the disease is when you don't actually like show evidence that you have the disease, but you just kind of carry it in your genetics. So then maybe when you have kids, you might pass it on to them and it might show up uh for them too. So yeah, that's pretty much an overview of pedigrees. We won't be going into that too much, but they're just really important parts of genetic research. So yeah, now let's go over a little bit about genetic disorders. Like we covered in the pedigree, some diseases are inherited just like traits. So, like if your parent has a certain disease, you can inherit that too, just like their hair color, for example. So here are a few examples of the genetic disorders that follow Mendelian patterns. That could be sickle cell anemia, muscular dystrophy, or cystic fibrosis. These sound like pretty complicated to you, maybe. Um, but yeah, these are just some examples of those diseases. You might not have heard of them. But yeah, if you want to look into any of them, you can take note and try doing your own research. So yeah, genetic counseling and testing for managing genetic disorders. Doctors can help families make plans to stay healthy. So here's some more applications. It can be applied in agriculture and selective breeding. So that's how farmers use genetics to grow better crops and raise healthier animals. Also, it can have an impact on medical genetics and personalized medicine. Genetics plays a role in understanding diseases and trying to, personalize treatments so that everyone can get the specific treatment they need based on their genetics. Yeah, I see Nicole said, "What do you mean by that?" And then Jaden asked, "Is there any cure for these genetic disorders?" Um, Nicole, I'm assuming you're talking about maybe uh the genetic disorders I went over. Um, and yeah, and for Jaden, um, in terms of cures, I don't believe there is. They're more like chronic disorders where you deal with them for most of your life or after a certain point. But yeah, you can definitely look into that on your own. Okay, let me go back a little bit to cover the disorders again. So Nicole, what exactly did you mean by uh like what you were asking about? Is there anything specific you wanted me to go over again? No? Okay. So yeah, and also Mendelian genetics can be applied in like forensics and DNA fingerprinting. So that can kind of help solve crimes and identify certain individuals. Oh yeah, Nicole said she doesn't know what cystic fibrosis is. Um, yeah, that's not uh it's kind of like a lung disease where it's caused by certain genetics that you can inherit. Um, so if you want to go more into the details about that, I can give you a few resources, but otherwise you can do some research on your own because that was just an example of some diseases or disorders if you wanted to go into that yourself. So, Roger asked, um, those disorders, what does it do to you? So yeah, like I said to Nicole, you can research those on your own time, because during class we're a little pressed for time. So, and since we're covering more about Mendelian genetics, we're not going to be going over those today, but actually, in one of the coming weeks, we will be going over genetic disorders, so I will be covering those in more depth. So don't worry about it. You can research it on your own, or you can just wait in a few weeks, and I'll probably go over most of those disorders that I listed. Okay, great. So that was most of our lecture for today. So what was something new you learned today? You can either raise your hand or put it in the chat. It can be anything. Okay, Nicole said she learned what cystic fibrosis is and other important info. Yeah, sorry I couldn't go more in depth into what cystic fibrosis is. I just don't really want to go too much into it since we're going to be spending more time on that uh, in one of the following weeks. Nora said she learned what a pedigree is, and Jaden learned about how we acquire traits. Great, thanks guys for adding that in the chat. Yeah, Roger said genetics. Yeah, that's the general gist of it. Jaden says, how are your alleles measured? Um, so yeah, I'm assuming by that you mean like how they're determined or how they're found out. It's basically like genetic testing, pretty much. Uh, yeah, you just have to do genetic tests to find out what certain alleles you have. There is also a a pretty cool way that um uses like a certain like material. I think I've done it before. I can go over that more in future lessons if you'd like. It's pretty interesting actually. But yeah, mostly you can just do genetic testings to find out about alleles. Yeah, Bryce learned that you can have a disorder and not be affected by it. Yeah, great, thanks, Bryce. That's a good detail. So yeah, you can carry it. Not necessarily have the disorder, but you can be a carrier of it. So then even if you don't have it, you can carry it on to one of your kids so that they could develop the disease. Yeah, okay, great. So let's move on. Any more questions before we move on? You can raise your hand or put it in the chat. When Nicole says that she learned that if your parents have a disorder, you'll get it also. Nicole, just to clarify, that doesn't like if your parents have a disorder, that doesn't necessarily mean you'll get it also, but it's possible you could be a carrier of the trait, or um, or you just like might not have it or be affected by it like at all. So that kind of goes into what we did with the Punnett squares. Like some of them didn't have dominant traits or had recessive traits. So it really is based on like um kind of like percentage and chance and stuff. Oh yeah, Nicole says yeah, that's what she meant. Yeah, so you might get it. Yeah. Great. Thanks, Nicole. Okay, so now we're going to be doing a quizzes game. I'm not sure if anybody here has played it before. It's kind of like Kahoot is basically where you just like answer questions. Um, so it's kind of like a quiz type thing, but don't worry, it won't count for a grade. It's just for some practice. So let me stop sharing my screen for a second and I'll get that ready. Okay, great. So can you guys see my screen? You should be able to see um a join code. So basically just use any device. It can be your computer, your phone, if you have one. So just go to joinmyquiz.com and then enter the join code. Yeah, Nora, it'd be great if you could just put your name down there or a nickname. Let me know if you have any problems logging on. Okay, so you guys working on it? It only seems like we have three people joined. Let me know if you're like having internet problems or anything. Let's try to get a few more people joined. Yeah, and if you already joined, while you're waiting, you can go um maybe take a look at uh Google Classroom. I will um post uh the assignments now while we're waiting. So I'm just gonna stop the screen share. Does everyone have the code already? Okay, great. We have six people. Is there anybody who still wants to join or is having internet problems? Does anybody want me to wait for them to join? Okay, yeah, actually, I think we have everybody, so let's start. Okay, for those who finished, great job. If you're still working on it, go ahead. But for those who already finished uh, the quiz, just take a look at Google Classroom. There should be an assignment posted. It's basically just a Google form that I'll use for feedback. So just be honest with that form. And yeah, I'll be having some more Google Classroom assignments on there uh, after class ends. But I'll talk about that in a little bit. Great, so everybody finished the quizzes. Great job, Bryce, Jaden, and Nora. You're doing really well. I'm glad you guys know your stuff. So great job, guys. Class is almost over. I just want to let you know that I'm gonna be posting some homework pretty soon. It shouldn't take too long. But yeah, you'll see the assignments. Uh, and if you have any questions, just let me know. Okay, I'll see you guys next week. Bye.